Hey everyone, welcome to my second comedy analysis video where I talk about comedian specials, run some numbers on them, and talk about their stylistic choices. My name's Aakash Jagdale. I'm a New York-based comedian, and I love to geek out on this stuff, so let's get started. Today I'll be going over Nate Bargatze's latest special, The Greatest Average American. A quick little bio on him. He really came onto the scene in 2011 on Comedy Central Presents, but obviously been doing comedy a lot longer than that. He's had hour-long specials in 2015, 2019, and now in 2021. He's also been on Netflix's The Stand-Ups. And bottom line, like if you're a real comedy fan and you don't know this guy by now, I recommend you go to the gym such that you become strong and you're able to lift the rock that you've been living under. He's not a very expressive comic. He has a very relaxed stage presence. It's kind of like if someone gave your chill uncle a microphone and you just talked about bits of his life. I think his comedy is really pure in that he takes very normal statements or events and turns them into really funny ones just by asking the funniest questions about them. Kind of like he does here in his last special, The Tennessee Kid.
A million things flew in the air when you shot that gun, and I'm supposed to know which one you hit? Do mountains keep growing? I don't think we know that yet. They had 3-month-old babies strapped to their chest. I was like, why would you bring that much extra weight with you? I left my wallet in the car. So what do you think I wanted to know when I asked that? Is that what you thought the best time you could give me was a time that means nothing to nobody? Is that why people call senators? Do they do it? I don't know.
Now those might be a little bit out of context, but I promise you the crowd responded every single time he did that. He jams a ton of stuff into this special. I counted about 26 different segments. Of course, he starts off with COVID like everybody's doing these days. But then it goes into a very diverse set of personal stories that are often framed with something more observational beforehand. On average, the segments are about 2-ish minutes long, but they can be as short as 45 seconds or as long as 3.5 minutes. And that's how you know he's an older comedian, because that is 3 to 15 times the range of the attention span of any Gen Z kid. I mean, they barely make it past a 15-second TikTok. Moving on to the math for this special, or as I like to call them, metrics of comedy, or MOCs. Not to be confused with this MOC, male of color. How you confuse those two, I have no idea. But people do stupid things. I've addressed a teacher's mom like 7 times in my life, so there's that. You'll see he opens up with his best stuff, which is very common for comedians. That's also when the crowd is most receptive, so that helps get the laughs up too. Comparing this to his other work, this one was one of his best hour-long specials in terms of laughs per minute, and don't we just love it when an already good comedian gets even better. Looking at the split between observational humor versus personal experience, you'll see what I was kind of touching on earlier, and that he spends the majority of his time making jokes through the personal stuff, but he has a decent chunk of observational segments in there that he used to quickly frame those experiences. That explains the difference in percentages here, where only 26% of the minutes are observational material, but the percentage of total segments that are observational is much higher at 39%. Lastly, there's my overall rating. I gave it an 8.2. I think there's a really awesome, relatable simplicity to his comedy. He walks you through these experiences that you feel like you could have, even tomorrow. I'm not a fan of the deadpan style though. He has enough good material to keep me constantly engaged and constantly chuckling, but it's the really active performers that get me guffawing. And I've literally never said that word out loud before, and I hate the way it sounds. But we're trying new things, and it's accurate. Last thought, Nate Bargatze is a great comedian to learn from. The way he walks through these very relatable events and observations shows you that you can really make any situation a funny one if you just frame it the right way or ask the right questions. For this part of the video, we'll look at some examples of how he delivers his jokes. The first one I want to talk about is one where he absolutely annihilates the institution of Chuck E. Cheese. Like he did the comedic equivalent of the Godzilla mouth beam down the throat of this company. What I love about this segment is just the specificity of his insults. Like anybody can generically say, hey, that place sucks, but the comedic effect comes from really creating an image of exactly how it sucks. So he first catches you off guard with this line, which helps set the premise that this has never been a great place to be.
I would take her to Chuck E. Cheese all the time. You can go there. They had COVID in '84. So you can't even survive in there. Chuck E. Cheese is rough. I don't know if you've been there in a while.
Then he jokes about how they've unsuccessfully gone through bankruptcy. Kind of like if you tried to fail a math test and somehow ended up with a C.
They look like they're trying to go out of business and they can't. They filed for bankruptcy and they're still open. They called Blockbuster and they're like, how do you get out? We want out.
The Blockbuster line is genius because it's such a strong poster child for bankruptcy and shutting down overnight in a way that probably also should have happened to Chuck E. Cheese. He moves on from that to talking about how all the tech is still old and talking about how loose they are with the parents that go there.
They're updating nothing. That Chucky band is just robotic. I mean, the drummer doesn't even turn on. It just sits like that the whole time. They sell booze to parents now. They just give them buckets of Bud Light. They're drunk in a booth at 9 a.m.
He then continues by reacting to some of the news about their questionable business practices.
There was a Chuck E. Cheese that got caught. If people didn't eat all their pizza, they would just put it back out on the buffet. And that would shut down any normal business. And with Chuck E. Cheese, they have thrived. I mean, when I read the story, I was like, I thought that's what they were doing. I thought we agreed that that's fine. I didn't even know what the article was about.
That reaction and joke served to emphasize how his standards were already ridiculously low, just like your neighborhood frat brother when he's 8 drinks deep. The other part of his comedy I'll talk about is the asking of questions. He kind of does this throughout, so we'll touch on a bunch of different segments, but right up top, he talks about how wild a year 2020 was, and asks a question about how we just avoided the news about aliens.
There's aliens. They said there's UFOs, and no one cares. What kind of year could you have that you could sneak in, hey everybody, on the news, they're at the end of the news, they go, there's UFOs. And you're like, oh, do they have COVID? And you're like, no.
Soon after that, he highlights how ridiculous it is that teenagers are taking our temperatures as a COVID precaution.
We're supposed to do. A lot of people are doing it. We're trying, A lot of stuff, we take our temperature. I went to Buffalo Wild Wings. They took my temperature. You gonna tell me that teenager doesn't know what he's doing? Is that what you're trying to... You don't think he's going to doctor school? That's how he gets started, is he takes temperatures. And he's like, all right, 45 degrees, you're good.
And in his segment about getting healthy, he strategically uses a series of questions to highlight just how bad his eating habits are.
He goes, go through yesterday. I go, all right, I had donuts in the morning. And he goes, all right, was it like they were just out or something? I go, no, I drove to it. I drove to it, and he's like, is it on your way? I go, nope, I was late to where I was going because of it. He goes, what about late night snacking? And I was like, well, I had Sour Patch Kids last night. He goes, did you watch a movie? I go, no, just regular TV. And ate only, he's like, the little kid bag? I go, no, it was a bag. It was a bag of them. If you saw it without a label and someone said, hand me that bag, they wouldn't be confused on what you were asking.
He could have just made it one line and been like, my trainer asked me how I ate and I told him, I eat exactly in the way that'll make you unhappy. But instead, he uses these questions to walk through how deliberate he is with this bad habit. Later on, he talks about interacting with a hotel front desk guy, and he responds to one of that guy's stupid questions with one of his own.
He asked if I was staying at that hotel. That's how he goes, are you staying here? I was like, do you think I've called the front desk from a different hotel room?
In the same segment, he uses a question to make a joke about how the hotel staff are getting just a little too comfy in his room.
I just remember like the back of his calves were touching the bed, and I was like, are your feet dangling? How far back are you gonna go? Are you cold? Do you want some covers, man?
And in the very last segment, he uses sarcastic questions to illustrate him and his wife fighting, which then elicits a funny, real question from his daughter.
We didn't talk that whole night. I mean, we're just sitting there, our daughter's like, we're watching TV, eating, and I'm like, hey, you know your mom's crazy, right? And then she's like, did you do your homework or you don't want to be dumb like your dad? And then your daughter's just like, are y'all lunatics?
All this is to say, if you go through life not questioning every last thing that happens to you, be better. And maybe live less peacefully, okay? Those of us that go to therapy find you very annoying. The little red bar at the bottom should tell you that you've reached the end of the video. And if it hasn't, sue YouTube. I mean, this thing literally only has one job. Thanks again for watching. Feel free to comment any suggestions for other specials I should look at. And if you could like and subscribe and all that stuff too, that'd be great. Bye!